Sometimes life is stressful. You just want to go someplace that feels like home. Sit on the couch, turn on the TV. Dang, it's not working. But that's okay, food's ready. Some Swedish meatballs for dinner. Oh my God, this is not home. This is IKEA. IKEA has tried to solve for the what would this look like in my house by building little versions of interiors inside their giant store. They want you to visualize what their furniture would look like in your home, and the best way for you to understand how it would feel and look is to show it to you. And it turns out 100 years ago, stores were finding ways to do the same thing. And not to be rude to IKEA, but it might have come closer to a storybook fantasy. If you have never been to IKEA, I can pretty much explain what you will find. When you walk in, you are greeted by an escalator that brings you upstairs. This is where you do your fantasizing. Essentially, this is a showroom, and as you walk through, you are greeted by false walls holding bedrooms, closets, bathrooms, living rooms, offices, kitchens. Sometimes all those rooms are combined together to create what I can only describe as an adult version of a children's museum display. Once you get done with your daydream loop, you might enjoy a meal at the cafeteria. And then you go downstairs, and you know how they say heaven is up and hell is down? The same is true at IKEA. You've already been there for hours, and at this point, you now have to go make a lot of decisions in a place that feels subterranean. All this glassware feels a little less homey without the table and the placemats and the general ambiance of upstairs. If they had shown Tom and Summer from 500 Days of Summer in the bottom floor of IKEA, we would have instantly known it wasn't a romance. Attached to what can be best described as the Backrooms but Swedish, you will find a giant warehouse, which will make you regret not writing down more numbers and not photographing the sign on the piece you wanted. The person who sat on a couch upstairs daydreaming now must encounter the big boxes that hold it. This is a place that should require forklift certification, but instead it's you, a cart, and your determination to leave with a very specifically sized storage solution. Now, lifting all those boxes might remind you of moving, which is something I very recently did. And I want to thank Roadway Moving for helping me get all of my things across the country safely and securely. You guys can't see it from my old recording location, but I do have a lot of antique furniture that I love, and it all means something to me. I found this octagon-shaped dining room table at a church sale, and I got it because it reminded me of the Octagon Room in Henry Davis Sleeper's home, Beauport. And every time I had people over for dinner, I felt like a 1920s bachelor. Or this dresser with a big mirror that looks like painted wood, but it's actually metal. And then there are, of course, the books you always see in my videos. These were all things I was worried about moving with because they are big and fragile and heavy, but Roadway Moving wrapped everything up so perfectly, and it got here safe to my new apartment. If I was describing what I like about Roadway to my dad, which I already did, I would say that they put down a long rug mat so any dollies and hand carts that they use don't damage the floor. For long distance moves, they actually switched between different trucks depending on the move location. The one that went on the wide street I moved from had its doors in the center, so they were able to cart things up the middle of the truck, and they didn't need access to the back for easier parking. But when I moved to a really narrow street, they used a small truck. They are just logistical masterminds, and I'm so grateful that they could help with this move. If you've got a move in your future and you want a quote, you can use my link down below and my code KendraG10 for 10% off local moves and 5% off long distance moves. Thanks again, Roadway. Where was I? Oh, right. IKEA and furniture and how you decide if you would like something in your home before you buy it. The interesting thing about IKEA is how it's all built around serving yourself. It's like the buffet of furniture stores. You pick the items you like and then you find it in the warehouse, then you drive it home and put it together all by your lonesome. But if IKEA is the super efficient self-service furniture store, that would suggest at other times there was something else. And maybe there were different economic furniture sale efficiencies that were happening in the 1900s that we can't even imagine. If you were in Oakland, California, at the intersection of Walnut and 55th, it looks like other houses in the blocks nearby, but if there is something about it that makes you want to live in your fantasy or buy a couch or curtains or a bedroom set, that might be intentional. Because this house was originally a model home. And not just a model home to get you to buy a house, but to actually buy all the things that fill a home. This is a full-page ad in the Oakland Post Enquirer for a retail store called Montgomery Ward. In the top right corner, you can see the house in 1927. Below, it reads, "Visit Oxford House, Ward's model home, open for inspection daily from 10 to 2, 2 to 5, and 7 to 9. The idea of this home was to show off all the furniture you could buy at Montgomery Ward's. Just like IKEA can probably sell you a console table better if you see it in a living room versus a photo on a cardboard box, this whole house was meant to show you what your house could look like. The rest of the ad is talking about the furniture you can find at Montgomery Ward's furniture department. the gyrator washer, overstuffed velour rockers, a fernery. Clearly, this place sold it all. So what was Montgomery Ward? It was the first general catalog, founded in Chicago in 1872. If Sears was the Amazon of the time, Montgomery Ward was the second most popular company that we don't have a comparison for due to now allowing monopolies. Sears and Montgomery Ward had much in common, both starting in Chicago, but Montgomery Ward started 14 years earlier. In 1900, Montgomery Ward had $9 million in total sales. Sears had $10 million. And at the start, neither of these businesses had storefronts. It was actually surprisingly similar to online shopping today, except instead of a website, you would search through their catalog, which had thousands of products. Then you would mail an order form with the money enclosed. Not to be like, this changed everything, but this changed everything. It meant more products were accessible to more people. Rural free delivery that the United States Postal Service launched meant that items that had previously been out of reach and completely unknowable to many consumers now could come right to their doorstep. And these products could be bought by everyone. After the Civil War, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act of 1875 to protect the rights of African Americans. This meant discrimination by restaurants, shops, and other businesses was now illegal. 8 years later, the Supreme Court struck down the Civil Rights Act, making it legal to discriminate. That gave local retailers immense power, affecting terms of credit, what could be purchased, and its cost. You could be priced out of buying a product if the shop owner was prejudiced. And then came a catalog that was available to everyone, did not discriminate, and had lower and more consistent pricing. You could order farm equipment and clothes and houses and even guns with credit. Both Sears and Montgomery Ward had their catalogs burned and were accused of having African American owners who ran their business as a catalog so that they didn't have to show their faces. That was not true. They published their photos in the paper to prove it, but I would read an alternate history book where it was. Now, the business originally started with catalogs, but over time, things were shifting. A few years before this house was built, Montgomery Ward was focused on storefronts. With more Americans living in more populated places, you now had the opportunity to sell where they were. No catalog needed. In 1923, Montgomery Ward started building a giant warehouse in Oakland. It joined their previous 5 warehouses in Chicago, Kansas City, St. Paul, Portland, and Fort Worth. And these weren't just distribution centers meant to speed up shipping on the west side of the country. Although they did that, they were stores too. And yes, they were big rectangular buildings, but they weren't blue. An 8-story Art Deco building. The total building complex was 910,000 square feet. That is more than double the square footage of the largest IKEA in the United States. For Montgomery Ward, the first floor was for shipping and receiving, the second floor was retail, and the above 6 floors were operations, warehouse, and offices. Package chutes went through each floor and corkscrewed through a 6-foot hole in the floor. Now, we can't go inside and look at that building because, this is what happened to it. But before it was demolished, people were trying to save it. And that meant submitting it to the National Register of Historic Places. Now, I have read a lot of nomination forms, but many of the buildings I see the nomination forms for are buildings that were preserved. But here's a document that ends up capturing and cataloging a building's entire history before its demise. And if this document didn't exist, I don't think I would have been able to find anything more than a couple black and white photos of the exterior. But unlike a lot of other nomination forms I've read, this one also had a lot of people who didn't want it to be preserved. At the back of the document are letters submitted from Oakland residents calling this building some very mean things. An abomination, a blight, an overscaled eyesore, a monstrosity. The very reason they hated it, its size and location, is the exact thing that had made it an asset when Montgomery Ward opened in 1924. They, Montgomery Ward buildings, would be built on the outskirts of cities, not in more expensive downtowns, and they would be geared to working class customers. And Oakland made sense regionally. It was one of California's biggest rail and shipping hubs. It opened up far faster shipping times to the entire West. If Montgomery Ward was a trendsetter coming to Oakland, Sears wasn't far behind. 6 years later, Sears was building a store in downtown Oakland. But unlike Montgomery Ward, their facility was just a store. Their 350th location in the country. They also went with the Art Deco style. It's the 1920s, baby. And like any good competitor, when they announced that Sears was coming to town, Montgomery Ward was sure to send well wishes in the form of a newspaper ad. A possible reminder to the community that they were in Oakland first. And they would know that Montgomery had been there because boy, did these guys advertise in the paper. I showed you that ad from 1927 that showed off their model home. Well, the paper was clearly the way to communicate because during the summer of 1927, Oxford House, that model home, was described in 27 daily papers. And they really get into why you might want this type of home. This is a statement directly from Montgomery Ward in one of those Oxford House articles. Too often in the decoration of display homes, its livableness is entirely overlooked. For that reason, extremes were not sought, but were rather avoided in our selections. Only good, usable furniture of reasonable cost, tasteful but with unnecessary frills, was accepted. Our display is one of essentials, well arranged. So that might get you into the idea that the inside you will find a modest interior, but another article by the builder on this front page takes it a different direction, leading with, "This pretentious small home of 6 rooms." So I guess we'll just have to judge for ourselves based on these very dark, very grainy photos of the interior. It's hard to see, but there is definitely a grand or a baby grand piano in the corner there next to the big fireplace, and we can see a dining room table with chairs in the shadow in this photo. And while I was doing research on this house, the actual house was on the market, so I'm happy to be able to show you where that piano would be next to the fireplace as it looks today. Throughout the article, they keep mentioning J.B. Pepin, and it turns out that was the builder of this house and 29 others in this neighborhood. Originally, when I saw this house, I wondered if they maybe had been using a Montgomery Ward kit house. I've talked about kit houses before. You could buy them through Sears and Montgomery Ward and other non-department stores. And they gave you all the pre-cut wood and designs and doors and windows, pretty much a DIY house that you bought from a catalog. You would then hire the builder who could put it together for you, or you could do it yourself, like a Hemnes dresser, except you get to live in it in the end. But that system of building your own house on your own lot was already starting to shift. This house was just the beginning of a larger trend where a developer, in this case J.B. Pepin, would buy a tract of land, split it up into pieces, and then build a lot of homes on it. When you swivel around these streets on Walnut and 55th, you can see other similar houses that were probably built at the same time by the same builder. Now you can kind of see the opportunity that Montgomery Ward had here, and for the builders as well. Normally Montgomery Ward would advertise and just send people to their store where their furniture was on display. But now every time they advertised, they would also be sending people to this house that was for sale, which is great for the builder. And when people do buy these houses, they now have a big empty house that they need to furnish. Putting furniture in these houses seems like a big time and money investment, but you can see how it would benefit everyone. They weren't the only ones to do this in Oakland either. Sears worked with a builder to furnish a bunch of houses on Allendale Avenue in 1930. Now this is kind of where I thought this story would end. A few model homes in the 1920s and 30s that sold some dining room sets. Big whoop. But as I was looking through newspaper articles, a bunch more Montgomery Ward houses sprung up in 1940, and those appeared to be planned and managed not by a separate builder, but instead by Montgomery Ward themselves. This felt like I was watching a resurrection because everything I had ever read suggested that Montgomery Ward closed their house building kit house part of their business in 1931. They had always subcontracted through another house building catalog, Gordon Van Tyne. But here were a bunch of houses and ads all over the paper advertising houses built the Wardway, which I had last seen on the front cover of their final house catalog titled Beautiful Wardway Homes. There is a key difference we can see between this 1940 ad and this 1931 catalog, and it has to do with money. The front of the catalog reads sold on easy monthly payment plan, but the ad from later reads financed through FHA. As far as I can understand from this catalog, you could take out a loan with Montgomery Ward up to 75% of the total home cost. The other 25% you would have to pay up front. Then you had a 15-year loan with a 6% interest rate for the full term of the mortgage. Now, the houses built that say financed through FHA, those would have been with HOLC loans, which were protected by the Federal Housing Administration. They gave 30-year loans with 5% interest rates, and the loans were amortized, which meant you owned equity of your home even if you hadn't finished paying off all your loans. So if you were halfway through paying your house off, you owned half of your house. So it's possible that some form of kit houses weren't dead quite as early as we thought, and maybe the way they operated just shifted gears. With a little digging, I found out a few people think we might have called kit houses dead prematurely, that kit houses built through Montgomery Ward and Sears could have continued through 1941, but the way it was communicated was different. Instead of a published catalog where homes were sold mostly individually and shipped individually, These were instead sold as part of larger home tracts, maybe deals done with factories or cities. Or in the case of Oakland, to individuals in a place they already had a foothold and access to materials. And for Montgomery Ward, they still got to use the same model home playbook they used in 1927, advertising a home that people could visit in the paper. But this time, it wasn't just the furniture they could buy the whole house. And again, because they were constantly yapping to the paper, we can find Montgomery Ward houses all over Oakland. I found this one on Whittle Ave, this one on 82nd Ave, and this one on Murillo Ave. And the Murillo Ave gets a full article and then a full ad spread below. All of the merchandise has been taken directly from the stocks of Ward's retail store. Costs have been kept low by eliminating specially designed pieces of furniture, yet the color scheme has been faithfully adhered to, and complete harmony has been achieved. I don't know if that's true because the photos are in black and white, but it does look nice. But the craziest part is if Montgomery Ward wanted to use an FHA loan to build houses right next to their retail store, they probably wouldn't have been approved. To be eligible for insurance, the FHA insisted on doing its own appraisal of the property to make certain that the loan had a low risk of default. Because the FHA's appraisal standards included a whites-only requirement, racial segregation now became an official requirement of the federal mortgage insurance program. The FHA judged that properties would probably be too risky for insurance if they were in racially mixed neighborhoods or even in white neighborhoods near black ones that might possibly integrate in the future. A neighborhood earned a red color if African Americans lived in it, even if it was a solid middle-class neighborhood of single-family homes. And if you don't believe that quote from The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein, you can check out the area number D15, which states many favorable influences like convenience to local and San Francisco transportation, local shopping areas and schools, and unfavorable influences, a predominance of foreign inhabitants, and infiltration of minorities. Giving this a red D rank meant no loan would be approved here. So if Montgomery Ward wanted to build some housing right next to their property so potential buyers could see their furniture and maybe buy a house, they couldn't. And instead, all the houses we saw are in the yellow, ranked C, or the blue, ranked B. So when the company was quoted in the paper in 1940 describing their home services, we know there was an inaccuracy. Nearly every home built through the Montgomery Ward Building Service has been approved by the FHA. It is our desire to make our service available to everyone. But everyone in 1940 was a much smaller group than it had been 15 years earlier. When the U.S. joined World War II, Montgomery Ward got out of the house building business. So did Sears. And then they never really came back. Building houses went full tract housing. But instead of the 27 houses here or 30 houses there, like we saw from Oakland builders in the late 1920s, you're instead seeing a much bigger volume. Just south of San Francisco, 24,000 single-family homes were built by one developer, Henry Dogler. If those look familiar, you might know them as the inspiration behind the Malvina Reynolds song, Little Boxes on the Hillside. The Wheats theme song. Now, I did all this research because I did a talk for the Oakland Heritage Alliance about Montgomery Ward and kid houses in Oakland, California. And I keep thinking about the many, many sources that let me learn all this stuff. The National Register nomination is how I learned about a 6-foot hole where chutes went through the floor in Montgomery Ward's building, or the newspaper article that outlined exactly where the model homes were all over the city. The ads that showed me the very furniture that might have been furnishing these homes. The Mapping Inequality website that lets you explore the neighborhood grades and descriptions within a map. And I try and think of those comparisons today. Currently, it feels like good sources on the internet can be wiped away so fast. IKEA got rid of their catalog in 2021, and at least the Swedish copies are being archived by the IKEA Museum. But since I originally wrote this analysis a few months ago, I can no longer find one stray image of that Zillow listing for this house. I luckily took a couple screenshots, but it's like that listing never existed. And that's often how the internet can feel. You might think, Kendra, no one from the year 2126 is going to care about how we shopped or about how IKEA worked or how we built houses. But as you can tell from everything we learned here, once you start pulling on the thread of a topic, it's kind of amazing all the things you find, how it's all connected, how the choices in government or company policy affect real people's lives. So per usual, my thought is archive what you know, scan in a document, a menu from your favorite restaurant, or take a screenshot of your apartment's listing before it's gone forever. You never know what future generations will latch on to, what they will find interesting. You know how kids growing up would dress up as a flapper or a hippie for Halloween? I think someday we will be seeing kids dressed up as hipsters and millennials, and the flannel and the mustache that we put on things as a joke will be as connected to us as a peace sign or a bob with a mid-length dress. You can't control what people latch onto, but you can at least make sure there is some good information around it. Thanks for watching this video, and thank you to the Oakland Heritage Alliance. This month on my Patreon and my YouTube member area, we will be unpacking all the books and putting them in my new bookcase that is certainly not big enough, but at least it's a start. I also have an architecture-related lamp to show you. If you like the topic of furniture stores, maybe check out my video on the Backrooms, which is officially relevant again since the movie came out. And if you like IKEA cafeterias, maybe check out my video on cheap eating. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!